Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're continuing down our list of the 50 best horror movies that you've never seen, with number 45 for us, but number 48 on the list, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Silent Night, Deadly Night came out in 1984 and was directed by Charles E. Sellier Jr. The story was based off a pre-existing story written by Paul Cammey, but was reworked and written for screen by Michael Hickey. And for a quick synopsis of the movie, it starts out with a young boy, Billy, and his family going to see his father's father, who is in an elderly person's home. It's Christmas Eve, so they're visiting for the holidays to let the grandfather know that they love them and still think about him, but he is in a catatonic state where he's not responding to anything. They aren't even sure if he can hear or understand what they're saying. While going over some paperwork in the office, the parents leave Billy alone with his grandfather, who suddenly bursts into life, telling Billy about the horrors of Santa Claus. He tells Billy that Santa Claus goes after naughty boys, and if you haven't been good all year, Santa Claus will get you on Christmas. This causes Billy to become terrified of the thought of Santa Claus visiting his house that night and begs his parents to not let Santa come to the house. And as bad luck would have it, on the way back home from this drive, they run into a guy dressed as Santa Claus, broken down on the side of the road asking for help, who starts to hold them up at gunpoint, attempting to steal their car. He shoots the father through the windshield and goes after the mother, trying to rape her. As she fights back, he gets frustrated and ends up slitting her throat. The killer does leave Billy and his younger brother alone, but he does go after Billy, scaring him just a little bit more and setting up the plot for the movie. Fast forward a few years, Billy and his younger brother are in a Catholic orphanage, and Billy starts drawing pictures of Santa Claus and his reindeer beheaded, which upsets the nuns in the church, who punish him for it, with one of the nuns saying that we need to help him get through this. Christmas is a hard time for him because of his parents, and the other nun saying that he doesn't even remember it, he's just trying to act out. Fast forward 10 more years and Billy is 18 years old and ready for his first job, which is at a toy store, and everything seems to be going well until Christmas time hits. Short-staffed and during the busiest time of the year, Billy is forced to dress up as Santa Claus and sit with all of the children for photo ops. This starts to eat away at Billy, having past trauma with Santa Claus, and he eventually just snaps. He goes on a rampage as Santa Claus, finding any reason to determine someone as naughty and thus killing them to justify the situation. Eventually, Billy goes back to the orphanage to try to go after the nun that used to treat him so poorly, but is eventually gunned down by one of the officers, and thus the movie ends there. Now, this was my first time watching this movie. It's considered a cult classic across horror fans, and it's one of those movies that people tend to watch every year around Christmas time, at least if you're a horror person. But I've never actually seen it, and I've heard about it, and I'd seen it on this list before, but I hadn't taken the time to sit down and watch it until last night. And with that being said, I will say anything I say in this video is subject to change, because I tend to find that after rewatching a movie a few times, my opinion kind of changes, morphs, and then solidifies into how I truly feel. So this being the first time watching this movie, things that I think now might change or be different upon a second watching. In terms of the movie, I understand why it's a cult classic and why so many people have loved it and consider it a holiday tradition to watch it every year. It's gotten certain qualities that are good B-rated horror movie that I can understand wanting to watch over and over again. I myself am a fan of B-rated horror movies that some people might not like or enjoy or see why I like them, but to me they hold maybe a sentimental place, or I just love them in the fact that they aren't the greatest, and I can see why this movie would have that kind of hold on people. But one of my biggest issues early on was with the grandfather. The whole opening of the movie is of the family going up to visit the grandfather, who is deteriorating in health. He just mentally is not there anymore, and they believe that he's kind of just mute, not really understanding or hearing people. And while there, the little boy's a little bit scared. I mean, any child going up to their grandparent who's no longer acting like their grandparent would rightfully be kind of freaked out in that moment. And the parents decide, we'll leave you here, Billy, while we go to the office and sign some paperwork. And then once everyone's out of the room, that's when the grandfather leans over to Billy and starts threatening him with the thought of a killer Santa Claus. And it's supposed to be like the true meaning of Santa Claus, but we don't get any backstory to that or why the grandfather knows this. There's nothing later on in the movie either that depicts an evil Santa Claus, or even just someone who used to be dressed as Santa Claus and going around killing people, and the grandfather's pulling that memory from his mental state. There's nothing that insinuates why Santa would be evil or why the grandfather would believe this. And it's like the writers just played the card of he's crazy and here's a crazy thing he said, but it sets up literally the whole premise of the movie. So the movie's already off to a shaky start in the sense of why did the character know this information? And lucky enough for us, on the way back from this creepy visit with his grandfather, they get their car stopped by a guy dressed as Santa Claus who, as I said earlier, ends up murdering the parents. We'd seen this guy earlier on go into a gas station and rob the cashier at gunpoint, eventually shooting him and killing him. So we knew this guy wasn't shy to murdering, and with Billy's parents refusing to get out of the car, he ends up killing them both. And Billy watches this happen, which I can understand as being a super traumatic thing for a kid to watch. And something they play up a lot is the fact that the guy dressed as Santa Claus was trying to rape Billy's mother. He rips her shirt open, we do see her boobs, but it's not like fun boobs because of the situation. But Billy sees this, and like that gets imprinted in his brain, and we see that later on in the film. When Billy's at the orphanage, he walks in on one of the nuns in bed with the guy. They don't really say who the girl was, we just kind of assume she might be one of the like younger nuns, like the beginning ones, but she's in bed with the guy and they're going at it, and I didn't know that they would even be allowed to have boys over. So we don't know if like the boys part of the church either. They kind of gloss over that. Maybe he was one of the orphans. I don't know. They don't really specify who these two people were. They're solely there for Billy to walk in on. And the strictest nun, Mother Superior, catches Billy watching them have sex, and she goes in and like whips both of them, and Billy sees her whipping them, and then she like goes after Billy and is just like, you didn't see anything, you don't know what they were doing, what they're doing was very bad. So now he has like 2 cases of seeing like nudity and sexual content tied to violence. So we know that that's going to be a reoccurring theme in the movie, where Billy ends up experiencing a super violent situation after watching 2 people either be naked or like in the middle of sex. So we know that that's going to be like an underlying thing with Billy. And then it fast forwards about 10 years later when Billy is 18 and looking for a job, and as I said, he gets a job at the toy shop that is local in town and works there for a few months. There is a ridiculous like full-length song, like 3 minutes musical montage of Billy in the toy store, like rearranging the toys and like picking up children and helping them find toys and, you know, like being super charming. It's ridiculous. It's a whole song's worth. Like the whole song gets played out and we watch, and it's just like this ridiculous montage of grown-up Billy, and look how sane and totally normal he looks. And it's like, I understand trying to build up the fact that he was a seemingly normal kid who snaps, but it's so ridiculous. Like 30 seconds and we could have been good. And you don't even know how much time is passing. You're not sure if it's like, because it seriously is like he gets hired, we have a 3-minute montage, now it's Christmas. So I'm like, wait a minute, how much time passed? He's been working there for a month? Has it been a week? Has it been a day? Is this his first day on the job? And like, he's just doing this great because it's his first day? Like, what is happening? So that was a little bit weird for a horror movie. I get the suspense and like the buildup it was trying to produce, but it really just felt kind of silly and was like, why are we listening to a whole musical number right now? And it takes up until Christmas Eve for the boy to end up having to dress up as Santa Claus because the other Santa Claus had broken his ankle ice skating. And Billy was told always in the orphanage to sort of bottle those feelings about Christmas, so he never told his boss what happened. His boss just knows that his parents are both dead and died on Christmas Eve, but he doesn't relay the information of the fact that it was a crazed guy dressed as Santa Claus. So he agrees to dress up and is super irritable and like creepy with the kids, where he's like, have you been naughty? You better not have been naughty. It's like super weird, and you expect him to almost like chuck one of the children out of his lap, but he seems to do okay with the kids. It never seems to be about the kids. But like this whole time they're building suspense as him dressed as Santa Claus, because you know that he's gonna end up snapping. Like that's just what's gonna happen, and the movie is very blatant to like set up all the warning signs that he's going to snap on Christmas. But one of my biggest issues with this movie is how long it takes to get there. It takes 40 minutes into the movie for Billy to hit the point where he wants to snap. And I like the idea of like building up the backstory of the serial killer to see why they are the way that they are. A lot of times in those movies we just get like a 2 to 5 minute like backstory on why the bad guy came out to be the way that they are. So I do like being able to see what brought up the point of the snapping. But there was a lot of moments in the movie where I was like, we had time to sit here and watch all this stuff happen, all this like things that don't really add to the story, and it's like supposed to be for suspense, but it feels like it's just wasting my time. Like, could we get over, like, I get it, let's keep going, you know? So there was a few like parts like that kind of took me out of the moment and made me you know, kind of like lose interest a little bit, but I was still holding out strong for this like miraculous break in Billy's psyche and for him to just finally go crazy. And after a full day dressed as Santa Claus, it's time to close the toy store doors and they start to party, celebrating the end of the busy holiday season. Billy doesn't really seem interested in drinking or socializing. He's still a little bit weirded out by the fact that he's dressed as Santa Claus. Everyone keeps making like Santa jokes to him, which he doesn't really find that funny because he's trying to work through some stuff mentally of like, I'm not a killer, I'm not really Santa Claus. But the more that people like enforce him as Santa Claus, the like crazier he becomes, because Santa Claus killed my parents and now I'm Santa Claus. So you can kind of see like the gears going in his head of like the panic and like all the past memories kind of coming back, and you just know that like we're hitting the points. And Billy sees two of his coworkers kind of hiding in the back of the shelves, making out, like getting all touchy-feely, and he sort of just like starts to really sit there, and you can like he's gonna snap. It's building, you can see it, and they sneak off like into the back storage room, and Billy follows them. And it's like almost heroic what he did, because the guy Andy was trying really hard to get the girl to like sleep with him in the back storage room, and she kept telling him no, and he eventually like ripped her shirt open and was like gonna rape her again, and you're like, oh god. And seeing that happen like brought all the memories back of watching his mother almost get raped, and Billy just goes apeshit and attacks the dude and like pushes the girl out of the way, and he takes like a strand of lights and lifts him up, lifts a whole grown-ass man up with a string of Christmas lights and strangles him to death. Which is like props to that kind of death. That was a hell of a kill. But does becoming Santa Claus make you like superhuman? Because that's what happens in this movie. He becomes like super strong all of a sudden. I don't know what about that Santa suit made him so strong, but it does. Like later on in the movie, he breaks into a neighboring house and picks up the babysitter and pushes her body through antlers of a deer hanging on the wall. Like just pushes her through the antlers and they like poke out of her gut. It's ridiculous. And you're like, how? Ozzy was an 18-year-old teenager, had the strength to do this to people. But, you know, whatever. It's just, I guess, crazy Santas are super strong. It's just, who would know? And the body count in this movie is 14. We get a lot of kills. The first 3 being the parents and cashier from the Psycho Santa in the beginning, and the very last one being Billy, shot dead by one of the officers, but everyone in between was killed by Billy. So he goes on a pretty successful rampage for the few hours that we get to see of him with Crazy Santa. And it almost makes up for the 40-minute build-up, but just almost. I do wish they maybe would have cut out like 5, even like 10 minutes of the beginning build-up story. There's just some scenes that feel like they go on a little bit too long, or just don't really feel totally necessary to the story, and I think that would have made me like it just a little bit better. But who knows, maybe upon my second rewatch I won't mind it as much. And one of the like bigger disappointments to me in this film was the lack of special effects. We see a decent amount of blood, but it really just turns out to be blood. We never really get to see anything gory or ghastly. Almost every time Billy kills someone, the camera cuts away right at the last second. We see like their shadow, or we just hear screaming. He like sticks his knife in a girl's stomach and cuts up her stomach, and we don't see like any type of guttage or anything spilling out of her. We just see like the bloody line, and then it cuts away, and then when it cuts back, she's like on the floor dead. So it's, you know, like we have like these moments where there could be really cool special effects, and then we just get like a sneak peek, like a little tease, and they don't show the whole thing. And it was a low budget movie, and that could have contributed to that. But it was a little bit disappointing. Like usually 80s horror movies have a good amount of really good practical effects, and this one just feels like they almost did and then cut it away at the last second. And when watching the movie, at least like the uncut Blu-ray version, which I found on Amazon Prime, there's a definite like difference in some scenes where the quality drops significantly. And upon researching why this was, it's because the original movie had 6 minutes worth of scenes cut out due to the fact that they wanted it to have a good rating, and those scenes would have caused it to have an X rating for the time. But for the uncut version, they wanted to show all of those scenes, mainly being all of the super gory, bloody special effects scenes. But the way that they were storing the film at the production studio wasn't the greatest, and it did have some pretty severe damage. They wanted to try to restore the film, but it was just nearly impossible, so they had to work with what they had, which was the unedited version of the film. And that's why there seems to be such like a drop in quality in some places, because they literally didn't get a chance to edit the picture. It's just how it was shot. But for the uncut DVD version, they wanted to be able to show the full movie in all of its gory fashion, but as I said, even that gore was still not super gory. It was really just like, I cut you and now you've got blood. Like he like sticks his knife in someone's side and like down the side and we don't see anything but blood. So that's like my biggest beef with the movie, I guess, is like I wanted it to be more bloody and gory, and it had like good setups where it could have been and then just didn't deliver on that. And I also wasn't sure what like the underlying theme of the movie was supposed to be, because Billy is running around killing people after telling them that they're naughty. That's kind of his big thing. It's like naughty, naughty. That's like all he really says after he's snapped, and he kind of goes after people who he deems are being naughty, mainly doing sexual things. Like when he breaks into the house with the babysitter obviously has a boy over because it's the 80s and she's a babysitter, and they're like making out on the pool table and about to have sex, and he breaks in and kills them, which that's the girl who gets her body pushed into the antlers. So I'm not really sure if the movie's trying to tell you like sex is bad, if like that's supposed to be like the underlying theme or tone, or if there even is supposed to be a theme other than Santa's crazy. Because it really seems that this movie attacks people who like to have sex, and I guess don't have sex on Christmas Eve or Santa will kill you. But honestly, the biggest thing I kept seeing when researching this movie was how controversial it was when it came out. It was only in theaters for 2 weeks before it was pulled because so many parents were protesting this depiction of Santa Claus. And this wasn't even the first time there had been a movie about a killer Santa, but the way that this movie portrayed the Santa Claus, specifically with the advertisements showing Santa with like an axe and shooting people, really didn't sit well with audience, and parents were horrified that someone was going to try to depict Santa Claus like this to their children. They had a couple of ads that aired. I think one of them aired during like a Green Bay Packers game, and that's really what set it off. Parents would stand outside of the movie theaters with petitions for people to sign to try to get the movie taken down, and as I said, it was taken down after 2 weeks. And it was in theaters the same week that A Nightmare on Elm Street went into theaters, and it actually outsold Nightmare on Elm Street during the first week. By the second week, Elm Street had taken over, and then obviously the movie had been pulled, but it was estimated that the movie could have made up to $20 million if it had stayed in theaters. And a lot of the articles that I found on the movie trying to kind of see like what critics thought, it really revolved mainly around the controversy, but across the board it seems to be a mixed review. It's really like if this is a cult classic for you or this is just a lame 80s horror movie. There really is no big in between, but like I said, I can understand why it's a cult classic and why it's one of those movies that every horror buff has been told that they should see. And with that being said, I do think this movie deserves to be on the list of the 50 best horror movies that you've never seen. It's really not too bad of a film, and I can see it being one of those movies that you watch with friends around Christmas time as a funny tradition. My favorite kill of the movie was the babysitter Denise getting pushed through those antlers. As just stupid and ridiculous as that is, and how I don't believe an 18-year-old boy would be able to do something like that, it's a beautiful kill, and who doesn't love watching a girl get mounted into a deer head? My biggest beef with that scene though is when the boyfriend comes up to look for her, and he like walks into the room and she's hanging on the wall, and he's like, Denise, and you're like, how did you not hanging on the wall? How did you not see her? So it's one of those movies that has those ridiculous moments, so you do get to yell at the screen of like, are you that stupid? Which is fun to watch with friends. I'll give it props for that. And as far as the gore rating goes, this is the first movie that I'm going to rate gore-tesque. It doesn't really have anything for us. It's not good. Like, there's not enough gore, especially for an 80s slasher film. We need to see everything, guts spilling, like blood coming out of the mouth, and we got none of that. We mainly just got like phony props getting cut open and like fake blood pouring out, which just isn't enough to do it for me. But do you guys think that this movie deserves to be on the list? Is it one of those cult classics for you? Or is it one of those movies that you kind of just could live without watching? I do want to watch it again, and I probably will eventually, and I will kind of have a better idea of how I feel about the overall movie, but I don't see this as a movie that I'm going to totally hate. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'll be making a post about this video as well. But I thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky.